Right. So I was speaking to a student earlier this morning, somebody who had contacted me through Reddit, and he had just taken the GMAT and did not go very well, especially the data insights section. And so I asked him, what prep have you done for DI? So what he told me is that he just did some questions, and everything used to look random to him when he was practicing questions, and everything looked random to him on the test as well. And the result was a DI score of 77. That's a complaint I get a lot. When I read posts online, when people speak to me, everybody says DI is absolutely random. Every question looks like a new question. We don't know what to do. And when I ask them, do you have any strategy to approach questions? They feign ignorance that can there even be a strategy for data insights? And the answer is yes, absolutely. There is a strategy. And in fact, the reason most people find data insights random, that they struggle with data insights, especially with regards to time, is that they don't really have a strategy to approach DI questions. See, let me give you an analogy. Why do you not find critical reasoning questions random? Or quant questions for that matter? Even in quant, when I look at a question, every question is a new question, right? Or in critical reasoning, every argument is a new argument. But you've been given a method for categorizing those questions. Like on critical reasoning, this is an assumption question, this is a strengthen question, it's an inference question, it's an evaluate question, explain question, whatever. In math, it's algebra, arithmetic. Even within those, this is averages, this is ratios, this is inequalities. And that is why it doesn't appear random to you. For example, if it's a strengthen question, it's an assumption family of question, the stimulus given to me will be in the form of an argument, the answer will come from the assumption, so you know what you're looking for, which is the assumption. You come across a percentage question, picking numbers would be a great idea on that question. But when it comes to data insights, the reason you struggle as much as you do, and the reason you find everything random, is because you haven't been given a method for categorizing questions. And by categorizing, I don't mean categorizing them into multi-source reasoning and TPA and DS, not those 5 question types. That's not categorization. But within each type, you need to be able to categorize the questions, because the benefit of that will be that the next time you get, let's say, a TPA question, you're not looking at it as a general TPA question. You're already categorizing it in your head based on whatever categorization strategy has been taught to you. Is it a quant verbal question? Within quant, is it calculation heavy or logic heavy? And the biggest benefit is for each of those classifications or categorizations, you will already have ready-made templates in your head, how to approach those questions. That is the DI prep, by the way, that has to be done, which nobody does. So then obviously you find it random. And that also saves time, right? When it's already pre-decided in your head that this particular category of question will be approached in this particular manner, then you save those 30-40 seconds that people normally end up spending on the test before every question, thinking, what is the best way to approach this question? That's already ready-made in your head. It's like a template. So categorization improves your accuracy and also saves you time. It's a great tactic. And it's not something new I'm teaching you. You've already been doing it on quant and verbal. So when I teach someone in person or in the DI Grail course, the one thing I'll be teaching you for every question type is how to categorize questions within that question type. That will also help you big time in analyzing your error logs. Because otherwise, if you look at the error log, all you know is I've made a mistake in MSR or I've made a mistake in TPA. That doesn't help. You need to narrow it down, and not narrow it down so much that every question becomes a new question. That's also not the idea. So you need broad groupings in which questions within a particular question type can be divided. That's called categorization. So I'm not saying you come and learn it from me or from the DI Grail, which is a very good source to learn it from, by the way, but that's not the only source. I'm saying whatever third-party resources you're referring to, whichever teacher you're working with, ask them to give you some kind of a categorization strategy. It's very, very, very important for data insights. So what I'm going to do now is I'll take you through 2-3 DS questions to explain to you what I mean by categorization. Right. So before we even look at this question, let me just give you a brief idea of how I go about categorization on data sufficiency. This is what I teach my students. This is what I've also covered in the DI Grail. So the broad categorization, of course, is quant or verbal, because these days you get a lot of those weird verbal questions on DS. Now within quant, and I'm going in brief, within quant, I don't categorize questions based on the quant topic. Of course not. So my broad categorization is it a yes, no question, or is it a value question? That is the first categorization. And you know what that means. Like if you read this question, a certain painting job requires a mixture of yellow, green, and white paint. If 12 quarts of paint are needed for the job, how many quarts of green paint are needed? The question is how many quarts, so we have to arrive at a specific value. So that's a value-based question. Yes, no, of course, you've seen those questions where the question will be worded in such a way that the answer has to be either a yes or a no, which I'll show you later. That's my first categorization, yes, no, or value. So if it's a value question, I know I need to arrive at one unique value. That uniqueness becomes important. If it's a yes, no question, I know I don't have to solve too much. I'm just looking for consistency. It should be consistently yes or consistently no. So that's the thinking that's going on in my head, not that this is a ratio question and all of that. And I won't leave it at that. I'll use one more level of categorization, which is, are these independent statements or are these what I call overlapping statements? Which is what it sounds like. Independent means the two statements talk about different things. Overlapping means they talk about the same thing. And what is the benefit of that? If they are independent statements, the answer will most likely be C or E. Most likely being the keyword over there. It's not a perfect science, but if I have to guess, I would use that. If it's overlapping statement, the answer will most likely be A, B, or D. You see, all this is already there in my head. And in this case, what do we have? The first statement says the ratio of the amount of green paint to yellow and white combined needs to be 1:3. And the second says the ratio of amount of yellow to amount of green needs to be 3:2. So kind of overlapping statement because they both talk about yellow and green. The first one also talks about white. But this is what I call overlapping statements. Independent would be if the first statement spoke about ratio of green to yellow, second spoke about ratio of green to red, let's say. That would be independent statements. But the benefit of that is I already have some of these answers in my head. And I also have a thought process in my head. So I'm doing it slowly right now. Once you've done enough questions using the categorizations I teach or that you've learned from elsewhere. I'm not saying learn it only from me, but I'm saying learn it from somewhere and start using it. Don't do questions randomly. In another video, I've discussed pre-thinking. If you haven't seen that, please go and watch that video. And while I've discussed it from a critical reasoning point of view, I did mention that I also use it a lot on data sufficiency. I always use it. Like the moment I read this question, I try to do some pre-thinking as to what information do I need to answer this question. Like the question says, you have 3 colors of paint, yellow, green and white, and 12 quarts is the total. How many quarts of green paint are needed? So, ideally I need some ratio of these 3 paints. Or I need a situation where green can be isolated from yellow and white. Yellow and white, I don't really care what's their composition, but green I definitely need to know. With that thought process, I'll go to the answer choices. And the first one says the ratio of green to yellow and white needs to be 1:3. I don't need to do anything else. That has to be sufficient. What the answer is, nobody cares. That's definitely sufficient. So that's already got me down to what? A or D. And see, this was an overlapping statement and I had already predicted that the answer will either be A, B or D. Now B is out, A or D. Second one says ratio of yellow to green will definitely not be sufficient because we have no idea about white. So A will be the answer to that question. So of course it was an easy question. But even on an easy question, I don't want you to spend even a minute on this. Do it in 30 seconds. With categorization, you can do it very, very fast because you know what you're looking for. It's a process basically. It's not like whether it applies here, it is faster here or it's slower there. It's a process that you want to follow for all questions. If I show you another one, once again, and I'm reading them fast because my focus is not on doing the question. In fact, I won't even bother doing this one. But my focus is on showing you how to categorize and how that takes randomness out of the picture. So a clothing manufacturer makes jackets that are wool or cotton or a combination of wool and cotton. The manufacturer has 3,000 pounds of wool, 2,000 pounds of cotton. Is this enough wool and cotton to make at least 1,000 jackets? This is your yes-no question. That's the first thing that's come to my mind. It's a yes-no question, which means I don't need to solve a lot. I need to look for consistency. As long as I'm getting a consistent yes or a consistent no, that's good enough for me. What do the two statements say? Each wool jacket requires 4 pounds of wool and no cotton, and each cotton jacket requires 6 pounds of cotton and no wool. This is what I call independent statements because the two statements talk about different things altogether, in which case, most likely, again, most likely being the operative word, the answer will be either C or E. Won't be 100% of the time, but as I've said in my DI Grail video, I teach a lot of these what I call 80% rules because these will make it easier for you to guess, to move fast, to save time with a very high probability of getting the answer correct. Now, whether the answer to this is C or E, I will let you figure out. Try this question and see what the answer should be. I'm sure most of you will get it correct. It's not a very difficult question. But now let me show you a difficult question also. So it says a company produces a certain toy in only 2 sizes, small or large, and in only 2 colors, red or green. If for each size there are equal numbers of red and green toys in a certain production lot, what fraction of the total number of green toys is large? So it's definitely a value question, right? We need to find the fraction. And if I look at the statements in the production lot, 400 of the small toys are green. In the production lot, 2/3 are small. They definitely look overlapping. And what did I tell you on the previous slide? If it's overlapping, the answer will mostly be A, B, or D. And now, if you've studied from me, one more thing I would have taught you is that answer choices containing absolute values, absolute numbers, will rarely be required to get to the answer. Let's put it that way. Especially when the question is asking you for something like a fraction or a percentage. So even out of A, B, and D, and this is a difficult question, it's a time-taking question. When you solve it, and you should try it, it will take you some time to get to the answer. So here, if you're running short of time, guessing would be a great idea. And if you've actually studied from someone like me, you've come down to A, B, and D using the overlapping statement logic, but you will also eliminate A, because I would have taught you that absolute numbers rarely give you the answer on DS. So you would also eliminate A, which means D also gets eliminated, which means if you were my student, you would have guessed B on this question. Now, is B the answer to the question? That you can figure out. I do, by the way, solve this question in a very interesting way, but that is in the DI Grail course. So if you want to see me solve it, you will have to buy that course, but try it by yourself, and you can of course find the explanation on GMAT Club as well. But look at the broader point that I was trying to convey. Categorization is very, very useful. On any of these three questions, when I was looking at them, I wasn't thinking of them as an averages question or a ratios question or something like that. I was doing my own thing, which I've been taught to do, which is it a yes no question or a value based question? Do we have overlapping statements or independent statements? And accordingly, my mind was getting primed to what the answer could be. So if I was in a hurry, I would guess and move on. If I had some time, I would solve accordingly. If it's a value based, I would solve a little more. If it's a yes no question, I would just look for consistency. So that is the benefit of categorization. It gives you a thought process that you can apply on all questions of that family. And that was one benefit of categorization, which is when you're actually doing the question, how it helps you. The even greater benefit is in reviewing your error log. Because see, in the error log, if you put something like, I'm making mistakes in DS quant questions, that's too broad a category. There's nothing you can learn from there. If you say, I'm making mistakes in DS ratio questions, that is too narrow. What's the likelihood of you getting another DS ratio question? Not very high. So when you categorize the way I teach you to, you will be able to create broad groups of correct answers or mistakes. For example, if you realize that I am making mistakes in overlapping statements. So let's say you've done 100 questions, then you realize majority of your mistakes were in the overlapping, not sets, overlapping statements in those questions. Then if you notice, most likely what you would be going with is answer choice C. Because when you're evaluating the second statement, you are inadvertently using or incorporating information from the first statement. So then, one, you naturally become conscious once you realize this. The moment on the actual test or in practice, you come across an overlapping statement question, you naturally become conscious, you slow down a little. Second, when you're doing these questions and you're getting to the answer as C, you will think twice. You will want to double check what you've done because you know this is a mistake I make. So it's helping you fix that problem. Or you will do something else to fix that problem. If you are inadvertently using information from the first statement, when reading the second one, I'll tell you a simple trick. Start with the second statement. If this problem happens a lot, start with the second statement. Don't read the first statement first. Read the second statement first. And you will see this problem will disappear. It's very interesting. I've tried it. So there are two benefits of categorization while doing the question and also while analyzing your errors. It's very, very useful. Again, in the DI Grail, I give you categorization for each question type. DS I showed you in brief, but also for the other 4 types. And that will take randomness out of the picture. Right? So now you see why categorization is very, very important. The biggest benefit being randomness will disappear and you will feel a lot more in control of the DI section. You will already have ready-made strategies for each category of question. So the decision-making part will become automated. And that's the goal. On test day, you want decision-making to work on autopilot as much as possible. You don't want to spend resources and energy thinking about what to do on a particular question on test day. That has to be automated. That's what you work on in your mock test, by the way. Mock tests are not to fix your conceptual problems. It's to automate the test-taking process. That's where the test-taking strategy comes in. which is a topic I'll discuss in another video. Let me not go into everything right now. But through categorization, you will learn whether to attempt a question, how much time to spend on a question, is guessing a better idea on that question. So if you are one of those people who finds DI random, please watch this video again and pay attention to what I'm saying and seek out help if required, because DI is a very important component of the GMAT and you want to be scoring at least an 80 on DI. Of course, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions in the comments below or drop me an email. My email ID is there in the description below. Cheers everyone.